these are essentially the kind of the structure of what I want to talk about in the presentation today. And I'm going to call these the 3 pillars of pressure because of a bit of alliteration always helps people remember things. And this is where it becomes, I hope, more relevant to the kind of construction and real estate industry. Because what I want to outline is what we see as the pressures bearing down on the construction and real estate industry now and over the coming years, and how to deal with them. So the first thing I'd say, though, is all these sources of pressure effectively come from the public and civil society. These are voters, these are NGOs, these are scientists, the people, the opinion formers around climate change and the energy transition. But that translates into these 3 pillars of pressure. Now, number 1, that is bearing down on the commercial real estate industry is coming from financial institutions. These are banks, these are insurers, these are asset managers who are looking to manage the climate risk that sits within their portfolio. So that's number 1. And we'll come back to some examples of these in a few slides' time. I think pillar number 2 is government and regulators. Now, Ben did a fantastic job earlier of outlining some of the regulation that the federal government is bringing in. But what I would say is it doesn't stop at the federal government. And this is, again, probably reiterating a point that Ben made. You know, Ben is working through all layers of government, from provincial through municipal, to drive regulation down that will decarbonize the built environment. And actually, you know, some of the most interesting regulations and some of the ones that I want to highlight today are actually at the municipal level, particularly here in the city of Vancouver. The final kind of pillar of pressure that I want to talk about is from large corporations who are looking to decarbonize their supply chain. Now, Geneviève alluded to it, you know, with her role at Amazon earlier. Amazon is just one very good example of large, enormous companies that are looking to decarbonize their own supply chains, decarbonize their Scope 3 emissions. And if you want to vend real estate services into those organizations, you will need to have a pretty credible plan about how you can support them decarbonize themselves. So I think we're going to come to the first pillar of pressure first, which is kind of banks and financial institutions and how they manage their risks, physical and transition climate risk. So we'll start there. So this is a super busy slide. I kind of regret putting it on here, but let me try and talk you through it though. But I think the key point here is how physical and transition risks translate into impacts to revenue for real estate operators, impacts to operating costs, and impacts to capital availability. So down the left-hand side of the slide here, you can see physical climate risk and transition climate risk. And in those buckets, you've got things like heat waves, cold waves, droughts, floods, severe storms, wildfires. I mean, it sounds like the apocalypse. You've got all these physical climate risks there. You've also got transition risks, which include policy and regulations, legal liability, technology updates. Now, if I can just pick one kind of tranche as to how this can affect the real estate industry, and we'll actually go into this in the next slide. But as I said, you know, in terms of revenue, floods can impact occupancy, they can impact rental rates. In terms of operating costs, obviously, if your building is flooded and you need to renovate that building, that's going to have significant costs, and it's going to have impacts to your capital availability. And you know what? I'm going to go straight to the next slide actually, which is a kind of physical risk flooding example here.